Hi guys. Today I had the pleasure of sitting down with Pia Cooke, the head of advisory solutions for Standard Chartered Bank for their global wealth management business. It was an absolute pleasure. She talked about her journey growing up in Australia on a farm to living and working abroad in London, Sydney, and of course here in Singapore. It was an absolute pleasure, and I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Cheers. Pia, good morning.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. How are you?
I'm very well. You may recall that 2 months ago we were going to sit down and do this.
Yeah.
And it rained, just like today, and your house flooded.
Yeah.
So,
there was a power outage, right? And we were gone for the whole day. So when it was crashing down and raining this morning, I thought, oh, Pia, what's going on? You look fantastic, by the way.
Well, thank you. You're looking pretty sharp yourself.
Got to try Rise Friday.
Yeah, thanks for matching.
Yeah, had to do it. So for the few audience members that might not know you, can you be kind enough just to introduce who you are and what you're doing at the moment, please?
Sure. My name is Pia. I am working at Standard Chartered as their head of advisory solutions in global wealth management. I'm an Australian, although I've spent as many years outside of Australia as I have in. I've been in Singapore for 16 years, and I'm a mother of 3 fabulous kids. I spend a lot of my weekends as taxi mum running around to all their sporting events, and trying to fit in my own personal exercise is a bit of a challenge. But so that sums me up.
Beautiful. Now, I want to go back because I want to talk about your journey.
Yeah.
We've got a lot in common, but one thing I'm really interested in is you grew up in a rural farm area in Australia. Yeah. What was that like?
So I have to say that for many of your listeners, it's probably quite a unique story. I grew up in a very isolated area in Western Australia. The farm that we lived on is about 7 kilometres wide.
Wow.
So if you stand in the very middle of it, you can rotate and not see a single person. The nearest town is about 40, maybe 35 kilometres away. The nearest city, which is Perth, is an hour and a half away. So, quite a different type of upbringing.
And what sort of farm was it?
So the farm has sheep, it has cattle. When I grew up, my dad was we had a cattle stud, which is where you have you're a professional cattle breeder. We have crops, wheat, canola, barley, all the things that, many of our Singaporean friends don't really get the opportunity to really go and be a part of.
And I would imagine you had to muck in big time all the time.
So look, these are a lot of the lessons that I learned growing up. My dad used us as labour, free labour.
Yeah.
And we, as a family, spent a lot of time working on the farm with Dad. It's a very seasonal occupation, being a farmer. In summer, we're harvesting, so everybody has to have a job, whether you're a truck driver, whether you're on the harvester, whether you're out there on the chaser bin, which is that truck that follows the harvester around, putting the grain in so that you can go all hours of the day. You've got to make sure that the harvester doesn't stop, and then the truck comes by and you can put the grain straight into it. A lot of jobs. So worked very hard. During winter, you've got shearing the sheep, you've got to drench sheep. It's just lots of things that happen on a farm.
Were you good at shearing? I've seen people do. It's quite physical. It's a huge. And it's very skillful.
It's a very skillful job, and it's becoming a very difficult profession to hire people because it's so physical and so hard, and yet it's not exactly a highly paid.
I reckon I could do it because I shear my head every day.
I have to say, look at you, Paul. I'm sure you'd be able to do it. But, you're doing hundreds of this repetitive job a day. It's not just like being a hairdresser. It's you're wrestling with an animal who clearly doesn't really want to be.
Did you have farm-to-table produce that you guys actually
So it's
consumed?
Really interesting. Well, absolutely. Our freezer was filled with all our own meat, and my mum was an avid gardener. Our garden was filled with vegetables of all kinds of descriptions. And the reality is back 30 years ago, living so far out of town, we didn't get the opportunity to drive into town and get all of our produce. So we had to grow it on the farm.
Amazing.
Yeah. So again, it's a hugely unique a journey to be where I am today.
It was interesting. I did this LinkedIn post where it was my son and I carrying bricks, and I bought some bricks during COVID. And the reason why I did that was I grew up, my dad was a builder, and all the lessons that he inculcated in us 100% translate to what I do now. And the reason why I'm so grateful to work in an office is because even though I enjoyed working outside, I did when it was cold, raining, or extremely hot. And you know, I think you take those lessons and you don't take things for granted, right? I'm sure
it's really interesting. I actually am still very passionate about hard work and getting out there and doing physical work.
Yeah.
I like nothing more than going back on our holidays to be on the farm, jumping on a motorbike, being involved in all the sheep work. It's a part of my DNA. And even today, I'll love going out on my weekends and doing things that involve DIY or painting my deck like I did on the weekend. So I appreciate the office environment, but I don't feel that that I would very happily have a combination of both in my life still.
You know what you've got to check out, if you haven't, Martha Stewart's documentary on Netflix. It's really,
I haven't seen it.
It just came out, and she used to live just down the road from where I used to live in Westport, Connecticut.
Okay.
But she grew up, basically she wanted to go into gardening, and everything stemmed from her childhood, you know, and what her dad and her mum taught her. So it's really a great watch, by the way.
Yeah, I will watch it when I get some time.
When you get a free moment. Now, talk to me, how did you come off the farm, and what was your journey through school, through to the world of banking?
Wow. So I think it's really interesting to understand what the environment was like 30 plus years ago in Australia and possibly even in your, you know, when you were growing up. I didn't understand the world as I understand it now. I didn't know the kind of career choices that were available to me. My world was very small. It was a small community. Farming was in our DNA. So to ask how I then moved into, how I went through my high school, well, our school only had a small number of students. I had to travel on a bus every day for 35 minutes to get to the bus, which in Singapore is not unusual either, but that's a traffic thing.
Yeah.
In where I grew up, that was a distance problem.
For sure.
So our school, most of us had to leave at year 7 and move to a boarding school. So at the age of 12, I went to boarding school in Perth, and that's where I learnt about the big wide world and got very involved in sport, picked up every kind of sport that I was able to sign myself up for.
What were your favourites and what were you best at?
Love athletics. Really love it. In fact, I was recently during the Paris Olympics, I was in Europe.
Oh, were you?
So real time, we were able to watch the Olympics.
What were your favourite events then that you did?
So I was a runner.
Sprinter?
I'm a sprinter.
You look like you got those fast quick fibers.
I certainly don't do it today. I don't have them today. But I was 100 and 200.
Amazing.
I could also do middle distance, but I wasn't the best. I love javelin, which may surprise you.
You should have been a heptathlete.
No, there were far too many things I wasn't good at. But no, I loved that. So I was the beauty about being a boarder when you are living away from home is that you are in this boarding house and there's this ability to sign yourself up for everything.
Amazing.
Because it's not a struggle with our parents not being able to drop you off to anything.
Yeah.
I could go and participate in lots of things. So every season I had signed up for everything that I could. Netball was a big part of my life growing up. Played a bit of cricket, might surprise you.
Yeah.
What else did I do? Never took up rowing. That's something I think in hindsight I would have liked to do.
Really?
But yeah, so lots of things. So that took me through to my high school.
Okay.
And went to an all-girls school in Perth. From there, I decided to take some time off because I was an early graduate. I graduated at the age of 16.
Wow.
Which mainly because I was a late birthday. And so that to me meant, I wasn't quite ready to go straight to university and be the youngest one who couldn't go out and get into bars and be honest. So I went and spent some time back on the farm.
Okay.
Earning some
When
money.
does the academic school start in Australia? Is it September or January?
No, it's a January to December. Yeah.
So
it's different.
Yeah. Have you read that book, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell?
No, I have not.
So it's really interesting because we were talking about our kids earlier. So my son is born on November the 26th. So he's like
he's
you were,
similar.
the youngest in the year.
Yeah.
And the challenge with that is if you know, because we all mature at different times anyway, but if you're a little bit less mature, you may be picked last for the sports team, you're academically maybe 6, 9, 12 months behind a lot of the other students, and it can have potentially a very negative effect on you, but it toughens you up either way, right?
So I think especially with boys, boys have a tendency to mature later than girls. So I certainly, it was a part of our thinking process for our son, who's also got a late birthday. And I know in Australia, a lot of parents actually choose to hold their children back they feel that there is going to be that kind of
So sorry, going back to, you went back to the farm, as you were saying.
Back to the farm. And so I worked for my dad for 6 months, which was great. We have a great relationship, but there's also a lot of tension when your young daughter comes back to the farm who wants to party and have lots of fun, but also be part of the family business. And so we, after 6 months, decided it was probably a good idea if I go and work for someone else.
Wow.
And if you speak to my brother, he'll give you a lot more details around it.
I can imagine that conversation
how that came about. And so I went and worked this is something that people would definitely not know about me.
Go for it.
I went and worked in a shearing team.
Wow. So you took this stuff seriously.
I was a rouseabout. Oh, no, so I was never a shearer, but I was a rouseabout, which is someone who does all of the bits and pieces around collecting the wool, putting it into a wool baler, helping the wool classes who actually will assess the quality of the wool. You're just a dog's body.
Yeah.
And it teaches you this incredible value of hard work. You work there from 7 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, sun up till sundown. You only stop for lunch and have a small break in between. It's really physical.
Yeah.
And that teaches you a lot of things about hard work, stamina, not complaining. So I did that for a handful of months, and that was a friend's business. And we were working on lots of different farms, friends of the family's farms. So it was a nice environment. I got to the end of that year. I'd saved up a lot of money and was also working on what we call the wheat bins, which is a grain depository where all the farmers can bring in grain at the end of every year when they're harvesting.
Yeah.
That's another very hard job because you're out in the sun all day. You're sampling the grain and doing quality control. So I saved up a lot of money, and that then helped to put me through university starting the following year.
Okay.
And I think it's really interesting. This is where the journey really begins because I didn't have a lot of mentors in my life at that time who understood what career paths there were.
Yeah. And you didn't have that guidance.
Yeah, well, Dad is an incredibly intelligent man, as was my mum. We had, they were amazing role models, but they also didn't understand a lot about the kinds of career choices that we have at our disposal today. So I went to my career advisor back at my school, and we were discussing about my university choices. I remember very clearly that she said to me, "What do you like?" And I said, "I like animals and I like sport."
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, that's a no-brainer. You either go and be a vet, or you go and do sports science."
Yeah.
Wow, a lot of depth went into that discussion. And so I went and did some work experience at a vet, and decided at that juncture that wasn't going to be really for me. I still love animals today, but I felt it was. I didn't like the distress that I sort of saw through that process.
Yes.
And so hence I went and did a human movement degree.
Okay.
And I started that. Enjoyed it. Very science-based, very much about learning more about the biology, the human biology of your makeup. But after a couple of years, I decided that wasn't really where I thought I would be able to make a career, make money.
Okay.
And I then changed and moved into commerce and business. And that's where I learnt the value of, finance. I understood what banking really was about. I did a double degree in marketing and finance. And interestingly, I thought I would do the marketing because that really played to my creative strengths, and that the finance would just be something that I would learn to invest my own money. But I got to the end of that degree and loved the maths, loved the banking piece, did very, very well. And so that then charted my career into banking and finance.
So interesting, right? Because that's now when, I'm sure you and your husband are having these discussions amongst yourselves, like, how do we guide the kids?
No.
And it's an interesting one, because I think most of us of our generation, I remember speaking to my mum and dad about what university I should go to. And my decision was based on, I lived in Zone 5 in London. I couldn't afford to go to Zone 1. So I had to choose, it had to be close to home because I had to stay at home for financial reasons. And so I ended up going to a university that was in Zone 6 because it was cheap to go from 5 to 6 than from 5 to 4. And that was the extent of the conversation, which is bananas when you look at it, right?
Yeah.
But,
and I think today we have this ability to have much richer conversations with our children.
I know.
And I feel so incredibly privileged to live in Singapore and have the life that I do.
Yeah.
I've lived here for 16 years, and it was the best decision that we ever made to come here. And we sit down with our children and we have open conversations about career choices, about even choices at school, about the subjects that they're choosing or the extracurricular activities that they're choosing.
Yeah.
It's a much more involved parenting style than my parents had. And that was mainly because they were really focused on hard work and trying to ensure that they made the money for us to have a better future.
Yeah, it evolves big time. So you finish university.
Yes.
What happens then?
Right. So I got a travel, but I got the travel bug and decided that I would move to London, but I would do it in a fairly roundabout way. It's a very common thing for Australians to finish university and go travelling.
Yeah.
Very large country, Australia, but small population, and we all love to get out and see the world. And I hadn't travelled. I was not a traveller by that stage. So at the age of 20, I went to London. And there began my life in London, where I had my eyes wide open. Learned a lot about just living in a wonderful cultural society, having access to things that I would never have had growing up in Western Australia.
Where were you staying in London when you first arrived? Which part?
I had a cousin that lived in London, and she still does to this day. She lived in a very nice part of London. And so I was very fortunate to live with her for a short period of time.
Lovely.
And then I moved to Pimlico, just down the road from Buckingham Palace.
Yes.
And then, like every other good Australian, I moved to Fulham. And I lived in shared accommodation, had a great time, but also balanced starting my career. And I worked for the Bank of New York.
Did you take time off and just chill, or did you go straight into work?
No, I did travel a lot.
Yeah.
I went through America, hopped in a car and drove up Highway number 1.
Oh, wow.
And went all through California and then up to the Canadian border.
Beautiful.
Hopped on a plane, went to the other side of America, saw New York, Boston. My aunt lives in Washington.
Okay.
And spent some time with her. So, yeah, travelled a fair bit and then got to Europe, did a bit of Europe.
But again, I think for any listeners that are not sure, I just think you learn so much and you gain so much. And then when you do go back to work or start work, you're ready. You've got perspective.
Yeah, I see a lot of people, and I'm sure you do too, in our industry at this age who are starting to rethink their career.
lot.
You get to a point where you don't burn out, but you're reassessing the amount of effort and stress that you've put into your career.
Yeah.
That's not me, by the way. I'm very happy with where I am, but I see it a lot, and I often think it's because people haven't had a break.
Yeah.
I was really fortunate that I got to have that break before I started, and I also have very much tried to keep balance within my life.
That's key.
And we can touch on that.
We'll come on that later.
Yeah,
So Bank in New York.
Yeah, Bank of New York is great. I mean, it was a low-level job. It's my first job.
Yeah.
I was an accountant, a trust accountant.
Okay.
Which was great. It taught me a lot about asset management, I was reconciling portfolios. I was, helping to book trades, doing a whole bunch of work that was not something I was relatively familiar with. So I learned a lot about balance sheets, about asset and liability. And it was a great start. But I very soon realised that I wasn't really destined to be an accountant. And I wanted a little bit more, I was a fairly competitive individual. I really wanted to.
Was still are, I would imagine.
Ask my kids that. I coached my daughter's netball team.
Okay.
You could ask my daughter if I'm competitive.
I can only but imagine. I want to see you on the sidelines.
Yeah, maybe you don't. No, So I worked there for a couple of years and then decided that I would move back to Australia.
Okay.
And I moved to Sydney. And Sydney is Australia's financial capital. It's the place for you to really cut your teeth in the Australian banking industry. And it was the year 2000. The Olympics was on. Amazing time. Anyone who was in Australia during the Olympics would tell you that it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was a really exciting time. So I'd moved there. I got a job working for Credit Suisse in their asset management department. And again, I was a trust accountant.
Okay.
I was leveraging off my strengths at the time and had lots of fun when I first arrived, going through the Olympics and part of that excitement. But then I realised that I really needed to do something that was more exciting.
Okay.
No offence to any trust accountant.
No, again, I think that's important to listen to your heart and know what you like and lean into who you are, right? Make those decisions.
Yeah, and you're never going to know straight away what you're going to be good at. You have to try lots of things and you have to take opportunities when they come along. And this is where I was so lucky to get my break. And I think we all can look back on our career and think, gee, I was lucky then.
Yes.
I was at Credit Suisse, but I had started speaking to some headhunters and still I'm really junior. I've spent 2.5 years working and my CV got circulated and landed at Citigroup. And I was really lucky that out of the blue, I got a call from an amazing team who said, come and have a chat to us. We've got an opening on the trading floor. We need someone. Now, that may not happen nowadays. These are pretty big opportunities that used to sort of happen maybe 30 years ago where people would be given the opportunity with little experience to come and join a trading floor. So I went in and met the team and they hired me.
Amazing.
So I joined the equity derivatives team in Citi in their investment bank. And that was wild. That was really fun. This is early 2000 still. It's 2001 by this stage. We were launching the very first ETF that Australia had ever seen.
Amazing.
And I was part of that team. I also sat on the derivatives desk. So we were, this is where I learned about equity derivatives. Became one of the sales traders and helped to, build out that business or be a part of that business. And just incredible being on a trading floor.
Well, the thing is, in the market, it's well known that if you learn to cut your teeth in a bank like Citi in particular, it's a great training ground. So you had that plus a new focus in your job.
Yeah.
So all the stars kind of aligned.
They did. And I had a great team that worked around me and some very strong mentors who taught me a lot about the importance of client relationships, the importance of hard work, discipline.
Did you seek your mentors or they naturally gravitated towards you and vice versa?
So when I was more junior, I didn't seek mentors. And that is a message that I will be telling my children about, where I wish I'd done more of it.
Yeah.
As I've become older, I've sought out mentors, but often mentors will also just naturally happen because there has to be a relationship between you and your mentor. There has to be something that is pretty special.
They have to care in the first place, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I was at Citi, I just became one of the pack and learnt from a lot of industry veterans who were around me who were amazing at what they did. But I probably in hindsight didn't appreciate it as much as I should have. And maybe that's one of the things I look back on and think I should have embraced that even more.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, this is great, this is fun, this is I got to travel a lot. I was traveling all around Australia. So I really enjoyed that period. But in hindsight, I probably should have stayed there longer.
You know, one thing when I speak to people, I remember the very first time I met with you, there was no agenda, just I invited you for a coffee, and we had obviously mutual friends. Yeah. And I think there's something so meaningful in that, because rarely will someone say no if you ask the right way. And I think that's the one message I have for a lot of people. Have those coffees, those informational meetings. And if you're lucky to come across someone who can be a mentor, listen, learn, observe.
Of course. And it's brave. It's a brave thing to do, to reach out to people and say, you know, are you willing to be someone who can mentor me?
Yeah.
There's a bit of a legendary story that when I was at Macquarie, and I guess we can get to that, but I'll just, we had a young grad that joined the team, and he had a lot of confidence, and he went up to the head of the entire division and asked if he could, be mentored by him. And we all laughed and said that was the craziest thing we'd ever heard. But it actually worked incredibly well for him, and he's now done really, really well. And I think because so few people feel brave enough at a really junior level to do that.
Yeah.
That senior leader was quite, chuffed by the fact that he got.
Listen,
right?
you need, again, people have to have courage. Now I think maybe because I've never worked in a large bank, and for me, it was like, well, I'm young, I'm 26, I'm 27. How do I get in the room of the CEO's office? And I remember when I was 27, 28, BNP Paribas was one of my first big clients. I invited the CEO, the COO, the CIO, the head of investment, all to my house for dinner with their wives. And the thing I say to a lot of people is, have you invited your boss for dinner or around to your house? Even if you live in a 1-bedroom apartment, right? That's fine. They know how much you're getting paid. But again, that's quite meaningful and powerful, right?
Incredibly. And quite a brave thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Because you're opening up a whole side of your life that may be quite personal or private, right?
Yeah.
So,
So you just have to put away all the naughty toys. So you left Citi.
Left Citi, and
where did you go?
I went travelling. Okay. So this is my previous comment where I said I probably didn't appreciate my opportunity that I had. I had the opportunity to move to Germany for a little while.
Wow.
And took that opportunity.
I didn't know that. Amazing.
Yeah. So I went and spent 6 months in living in a little town called Ratingen. Which is just out of Dusseldorf. Okay. I'm German. I had a great time. Then I came back, and that's when I decided it's time to become serious.
How old were you at that stage, roughly?
I was probably 24 by that
stage.
Still
young. You're still so young,
you are
right?
Still young, and I know you make decisions based on, gut feel at the time, and this was a great. I still look back, and I'm very pleased that I spent time in Germany, and it was an opportunity that wouldn't have come up under normal circumstances. So I enjoyed that. But when I arrived back in Australia, that was when I decided it's time to get serious about life. Okay. And
you went back to Sydney?
Went back to Sydney.
I want to tell you a quick funny story about, so Maurice Green won the 100 metres in Sydney in the Olympics.
Yep.
And some idiot that didn't know who he was tried to steal his bag at the airport. They tried to mug him. They grabbed his bag, ran off. And of course, the fastest man in the world chasing you. And he's built like a bulldog. It didn't go so well.
He caught him?
He caught him.
This is at the Sydney airport?
Yeah.
Oof, wow.
So
didn't hear about that.
Yeah, that was classic, right? But anyway, so you're back to Sydney.
Back in Sydney. Okay, this is becoming quite a long story, which was not my intent. But I then got a job at Deutsche Bank under a wonderful man called Dave Sarkis, who moved to Hong Kong and lives in Sydney. I think he's back in Sydney now. And worked on their equity derivative desk. And again, firsts, we were really lucky to build out the first barrier equity derivative in Australia, so barrier warrants. which is really exciting because we shot to number one. We were the market leader very quickly, and that was a great time. Spent a couple of years on that desk learning a lot more about how to trade and how to be a good salesperson.
Yes. Can we touch upon that? Because sales in most industries is a dirty word, and I don't know why, because at some point we all have to sell.
It is, yeah.
You know? What have you learned about sales over the years? Like, what are the key things you've learned to be, a world-class sales practitioner?
So I've been fortunate to never have to be one of the cold callers who are, probably where you feel is a bit of a bad rap.
Yeah.
Been really fortunate to work for good companies with great brand names.
It helps.
So being able to pick up a phone and make a sales-related call is a lot easier.
Yeah.
But that only gets you in the door.
Yes.
And then you need to rely on your relationship skills, on your ability to have a great elevator pitch.
Yeah.
And build trust and confidence. That's a really important part.
Well, you can't say this about yourself, but your reputation is stellar, right? Integrity, real character, and I think those things will come. They come through, and I think it takes years to build a reputation, but that helps.
Yeah.
And then obviously you have to deliver, right?
Yeah. And I remember hopping into the seat at Deutsche and being told, "Here's your client list.
Okay.
Get on that phone."
Love it.
And it was a really phone-based job, right?
Yeah.
You are now. So we were sales traders. You are sitting there with your screens. You are executing everything that you sell. So as markets are open, you are on that phone. You are speaking to clients. You're speaking to financial institutions who are professionals, and they ask you to execute right then and there. They're price sensitive. It's intense and high pressure, but it comes with a lot of highs.
Yeah.
And being a competitive bunch, when you're on a trading floor, you are typically surrounded
punchy,
by,
right? Some alphas.
Yeah, a lot of really highly confident people.
Yeah.
And so it becomes every day it's about winners, and it's about who's putting on the biggest deals. But at the same time, making sure that your client relationships stay strong. You're given this book, you're being told that you're responsible for company X, company Y, clients X, clients Y. And, your job is to maintain that client book and grow it.
Yeah.
And you've got someone at a bank just next door who's also been given that book. So it's a really, you're competing amongst yourselves on the floor, but you're also competing with all the other relationships around the market.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I've always felt that, cannibalism does happen in an organization, but I've always felt if you work with a great group of people, you operate as a team.
Yeah.
And going back to that point about winning, I read a quote from Usain Bolt referring to his coach, because sprinting was my first love. And his coach, Glenn Mills, said early on in his career, he told him, you've got to learn how to lose before you can learn how to win, right? Because you have to embrace it. You've got to learn from your losses. You can't let those setbacks hit you. You've got to, take that information, download it, and build towards those victories.
Well, but that's not just sprinting. It's applicable for everything.
Yeah, 100%.
You speak to your kids nowadays, and they themselves are competitive. They're playing sport. They want to win. They lose. You've got to, teach them the value of loss and how to be a good loser.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse. As a netball coach, there's nothing worse to see bad losers when you're on your court.
Well, before we go on, I just want to tell you this story about my son. So he was in the Singapore National Championships a couple of years ago, and
Which sport?
Boxing. And he lost in the semi-finals, and I don't think he should have lost because the referee didn't know what he was doing.
Sorry, are you a bad loser?
No, not at all. The referees, I think if you're going to be in it, need to be proficient, and I'm proficient in everything I do. I make sure
Yes, you are.
100%. And that guy didn't know what he was doing, and that's okay. So Caden lost. He cried outside, a little cry, and but this is what I really, really admired him for. He went back in to go and congratulate the fella, but then he saw this guy's family, and they didn't recognize him at first because he was wearing headgear, and he went to congratulate all of them, and then he said, I'll be cheering for Addy in the final. And then he went up to the boy and he said, look, congratulations on the win. And then he said, but I want that rematch. That's what he said. And I said, I love that. I absolutely love that. And I didn't ask him to do that. He did it on his own.
But that shows such sportsmanship.
Yeah.
Right? The strength and the courage to go and shake his hand, to speak to the family. I love that.
Yeah.
But I love that little element of I'm still competitive and I know that I can.
Yeah.
I could,
and that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So I'm curious because, in private banking, the majority of people in our industry are from private banking.
Yeah.
And you made the switch. You moved from the trading floor to private banking. Yeah. What was the genesis? How did that come about?
So from Deutsche, I then moved to Macquarie. I'll just finish that because that's actually part of the story. So Macquarie is the best bank to work for in Australia, right? It's the pinnacle of your career to get a role at Macquarie, and I to this day still have some amazing friends that I made there. In order to work at Macquarie, you have to go through an incredibly rigorous interview process. And then when you get to the end of your interview process, you need to do a psychometric test. And that in itself is incredibly intense. And there's many, many candidates that don't then pass that in order to get through the gate.
Yes.
What it means, though, is through this testing, you are profiled and you get a personality profile, and that's what they then look for in order to see whether you're going to be a good match for the team. What that meant was that at Macquarie on the trading floor, I spent 5.5 years there. There was a lot of alpha. There was a lot of A-type personalities. And more than any other bank that I'd worked for, that's where I learnt I learnt all about competition, and I learnt a lot about being tough. Because there were a lot of people there who were, had been in the industry for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was sink or swim.
Okay.
So I had a great time there and learnt a lot of the skills that I now have put into practice today.
Did it make you get even tougher, do you find? For sure?
My time at Macquarie was the best time that I've had in my career, as far as excitement, as far as being part of an incredibly strong franchise that believed in winning and believed in success. We would celebrate success. It was really a very exciting period of my life.
Love it.
But you burn out. And many of my old trader friends will tell you that, it was a stressful industry. So we got to the end of 2007, and that's where the global financial crisis was just starting to show, there were cracks that were emerging in the system. We had an enormous derivatives book at the time, and we were the number one player at Macquarie. And so as we got into 2008 and we started to become a little bit concerned about what was going on in the US markets, the business was starting to realise that we had too much risk on our books. And then come the end of 2008, when we had Lehman's, we had Bear Stearns, we had it was really, really difficult. The business went into a tailspin, and many banks went through a similar experience. But when you're in a derivatives business, when we are typically short Vega in our books, and volatility went through the roof, the business went into a tailspin. So we got to the end of 2008, and I myself personally was finding it really stressful.
How did you navigate that very turbulent time, though?
You look back, it was a really difficult time. But I now look back and go, wow, I learned a lot through that. Having to come in every day and speak to clients who are losing money, who are desperate, and there's just no market. You can't give them a market to sell something back, or you can't provide any kind of hedge for them. It was very confronting. And then as a bank, we had to protect our franchise, and we were having team meetings of what are we going to do to protect the business.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of learnings through that, but we came through that. And then there was a big restructure in the bank. And at the time, my husband then got an opportunity to move to Singapore, and we took it.
So, that I find that so interesting, because when you look back at that period and those war rooms. Because I think, there's a lot of ageism in our business, and I don't understand why, because I think people are living for longer, healthier. But I think if you're trying to engage a senior person who hasn't been through 2 or 3 recessions and difficult times, you're missing a beat. Do you know what I mean? But so then the fun.
So two formative things in my memory from being in a investment bank.
Yes.
Was September 11.
Okay.
Absolutely forged in my brain when I was at Citi, and what that felt like to come in and just see everybody. We'd never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
And then the global financial crisis, again, being so close to the trading side and the risk that we had on our books, and understanding the implications of that was a really fairly monumental part of my learning. So I go back to your point. Yes, if people haven't seen these cycles, and we've been lucky, we've had a fantastic bull market for quite a long time now.
Yeah.
If you haven't experienced the downs, it means that you may not really be prepared and ready for what's ahead.
So
Singapore. So my husband got a job up here, and we decided that we would move up here. And 2009 was also a difficult time in Singapore in the banking industry.
Yeah.
Like everywhere, banks were laying people off, were not hiring. So I took a little while to get a job here, and I was very lucky to get an opportunity at Barclays in their private bank. So I'd never thought to move into private banking. Investment banking was my DNA. It was something that I was very familiar with. But I got the opportunity to go to Barclays and work on the structured products desk and use my derivative knowledge in that way. Great bunch of people.
Yeah. Very dynamic business, very dynamic team of people, right? Back then.
Yeah. And I have a lot to be grateful for the opportunities that I was given, for the people that hired me, for the risk that they took, because I didn't have a private banking background. I was an Australian who
hadn't been in Singapore.
Yeah. So...
But by the way, don't you think there's something in that? Because I find that, unfortunately, most hiring managers that I work with today in HR departments, they want someone tried and tested, been there, done that. And that's great. Of course it is. But I always, our track record as a business in the last 17 and a half years, just over 90% of the people we've ever placed are still working in the companies we placed them in.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think one of the key reasons is because we found people that were stepping up into something slightly new, different, challenging, and that caught them on the right trajectory, and which means they're excited about the role. They're not moving just for money or because there's a push factor.
Well, I also think that you can teach people
skills and
technical skills.
Yeah.
What you can't teach them is passion and energy and curiosity and the ability to inspire people. These are things that if you are able to bring that to a role, that is so
huge.
That's 90% of what leadership is.
Yeah.
You can then teach people other skills. So Barclays, I was there for quite a number of years, and in fact that was a really formative time for me because that was where I had my 3 children. So I was there between 2009 and 2016. Very long period of time, actually, 7 years.
Oh, was it all in that the structured products department?
Yeah. So I learned all about sort of more of the private clients and what their needs and expectations are, which is quite different to what an institutional client would be.
Yeah.
And really interesting because we went through a takeover.
Yeah.
Bank of Singapore purchased Barclays at the end of 2015 or early 2016.
At the time, do you remember, because BOS wasn't one of the named acquirers, it wasn't on the even shortlist.
I know.
And it kind of came out of the blue for many people.
So it's really interesting being on the side of being acquired.
Yeah.
Because you feel very vulnerable.
Yeah, of course.
You don't have the knowledge, you don't have the facts, you only have the rumors. Who is going to take us over? Who's going to be taken with the bank?
Yeah.
We knew that there is a lot of duplication between Barclays and any company that would acquire us, particularly when you're in a products role. Yeah. And I think this is really interesting around wealth management in general. Mm-hmm. When you're in a products role, people have this tendency to think that you're possibly not as valuable as a frontliner, as an RM.
Yeah.
RMs come with this ability to bring in new money, bring in new clients, bring in this product people. Well, these are skill sets that are relatively transferable and we can bring new people in. So as being on the side of being acquired, we spent a period of about 6 months in with a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And then when it was announced that Bank of Singapore were taking us over, we were quite surprised, as you mentioned. And then the beauty parade began, and we were getting introduced through a series of senior management meetings to the BOS team, and they were picking who they would want on their team.
Interesting.
And I was lucky enough to be picked. Sounding like a sport analogy, isn't it?
Yeah, no.
And so I moved to Bank of Singapore in November 2016.
But you were one of the few people from my memory that were absorbed into the investment products team, because a lot of people on that side moved to the investment counselling team, for example. It was a bit different construct, right?
It was. And I think all up, about 30 of us went across. So it was not everybody, about half. And that was where I moved into a much bigger bank, got much greater exposure to the different parts of the bank than I probably did at Barclays.
Were you put into a new role on day one when you were under the BOS umbrella?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to work with Jean, who I know you are great friends with.
Yeah.
And to this day, she's a wonderful mentor of mine.
Amazing lady, yeah.
And so I began in structured products and then moved into cash equities and structured products, which meant that I was covering both and was leading the team. And that was a great opportunity for me. It was a much bigger role and really enjoyed that. Jean is an incredibly inspirational person, and she was really great at making sure that we, as the new kids, were well integrated. I laugh and we look back on that time, and she, as the bank that acquired us, also talks about the intensity of that period where leading up to that offer that they made, what they had to go through in terms of due diligence, in terms of, really trying to understand our business and see whether the fit was right.
Do you know when I knew that this was a possibility, I would see very senior people walking from Bank of Singapore to OCBC, like at 7 o'clock at night with folders. Like every time I would drive home, and it was always after 7 o'clock. Yeah. And I thought, something's going on.
Something's going on.
And
it was a very, everybody that you and I know at BOS who were in senior positions look back on that time and say, it was intense. It was an all hands on deck experience.
Massively so.
It's not just we have a war room and it's kept, Chinese walls from everyone else. It was anybody who needed to get their hands dirty and really understand what was in the books. Got brought across the wall. Joined there. I was it was like a marriage, a second marriage where you've got stepkids. So you've got
I like the analogy.
You've got the family who's been together, and then the stepkids join. And we were this group of, newbies who had to very quickly feel that we fitted in and that we could add value to the business. And I think you'll ask a lot of your friends who were in Bank of Singapore at the time that the Barclays acquisition was an incredible acquisition for them. That the skill set that we added, the books that we added was incredibly complementary and helped BOS to scale to where it is today.
It's funny because I had worked with ING before OCBC acquired them. Yeah. And there were a lot of similarities that I could see between ING and Barclays in terms of the size and the dynamism of the team. But I remember with Barclays, I placed the most senior banker revenue-wise that the bank had ever hired. And Srini had got a $1.5 billion FX line for one of the clients.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah.
And this guy, and they did, $5 million in revenue on day one kind of thing. And it was crazy. And that's where you really see the front office, the banker side, working with the products team so closely to get things lined up.
Well, and that was the big difference between the two banks. Barclays, we sat on the floor.
Yeah.
The RMs were arm's length.
Yeah.
And would come over and hustle me, get me the best price, get me to this, speak to this issuer, do this.
Yes.
And I loved that because we were very integrated into the front line.
Yeah.
Bank of Singapore, by virtue of its size, you have to sit very separately. And that is typical with most of the big private banks. Your products team end up being in a very different area to your RM.
Well, I think the thing is with that team, they would have had a real appreciation for you, because if you look at when I placed Fidelis, he was not from private banking either. Right. And Mark Van der Wal had the vision and the foresight to hire someone like him. And, Fidelis and Mark, they assembled this amazing team with Gene and Shu Wei and what have you. So then how did your career take off? Because this is where it started reshaping, right?
Yeah.
And what you started
doing. So, derivatives were my, were my area of expertise, but I learned a lot of other skills. And that's one great thing that BOS taught me around the importance of building very, very strong relationships with the front line.
Yeah.
And building champions who believe in you, believe in your product. Because at any one point in time, we know that an RM is bombarded with things that they need to do.
When you say,
go out.
Sorry, I want to touch upon that because you made such a great point about building champions.
Yeah.
Just elaborate on that, because I always feel that that's something that is people overlook, because I think we all recognize it helps if you have a godfather or godmother in the business. But unequivocally, you need to have multiple champions in different ways, right?
Yep, absolutely. So back to my point around RMs are at any one point in time being asked to do many, many things. It's not an easy job.
Yeah.
Anyone out there who hasn't been an RM and goes, you're just out whining and dining, it is not the case. It's far from it. It's a challenging job. They have to bring in new clients. They're expected to bring in new money. They are expected to generate revenue. There are many, many metrics that at any one point in time they're being judged on. And so as a product team, you are competing with other areas of the capital markets. You talked about Shu Wei, you will be competing with the FX team, you'll be competing with the funds team, you'll be competing with the alts team for eyeballs and time. So you have to build relevance. You have to find champions in the front line who are willing to believe in you, willing to bring you to their client meetings, willing to make you a part of their team. And that's really important, something that I didn't appreciate as much until I arrived at BOS, that you need to have a team that can go to a client and showcase the bank's capabilities.
Yeah.
Because if it's just an RM seeing the client at any one point in time, the RM will pick and choose what they're going to speak to the client about. So if I wanted to build revenue, if I wanted to make sure that I've got something really interesting that needed to be shared with some of our best clients who I thought really would be interested in this, and I would make sure that I knew who these people were in the front line that I needed to be close to, so they'd take me out and we'd engage with clients.
So you looked after managed investments.
So I moved across. I, at the time, was looking after structured products and equities. And then you mentioned Fidelis earlier and Mark. They also are very important people in my career. Asked me if I would like to move across and look after the advisory team in managed investments and discretionary portfolio management. And like many sliding doors moments that we have in our lives, I said to myself, should I do this or not? This is moving out of my wheelhouse. This is not an area that I feel I will add value. You always have these moments of insecurity, may I say it, where you think, can I comfortably take on something brand new, run a team, and succeed?
Were you very honest? Knowing you probably were. Did you ask them, why do you think I can do this? What's behind your thought process?
I'm a relatively transparent person, so maybe my honesty is one of my pitfalls. But yeah, absolutely. What have I got that someone else wouldn't bring to this role? And one thing I can say very openly about Fidelis is that he's an amazing individual, and he inspired me. I always used to laugh and say I could be knee deep in work, so busy, like have so many things going on, and then I would hear him yell out down the floor, "Pia, you got 5 minutes?" And I'd walk into his office and I would have no bandwidth at all. And yet I would come out feeling so inspired and so ready to do anything for him. I'd fly to the moon. So he just basically sold it on me and I moved across. Amazing team. And to this day, a lot of the team is still there.
Yeah.
We managed to grow the business significantly, and we reshaped it a little as well. I'm a very data-focused person. I believe that data is incredibly important. All the relationships, all that aside, data actually tells you a lot about the business.
Absolutely.
And we became very data-focused in the team at the time. Bank of Singapore was embarking on a really big data analytics program, which has really helped to reshape the bank as it is today, because it put the power of visibility and what's really going on under the hood into each of the product teams.
Which is so important, right?
And so we built out propensity models and all kinds of really interesting things that allow us to think about how we can engage clients differently. Who are our highest, the kind of clients that would be most interested in what we are, looking to.
When you were talking about Fidelis, I was just thinking, Mark invited me to come to the trading floor and see everything. And I knew 100% when I got there, if Fidelis was there, he'd be standing up, walking around, which he was. And Kevin Wong was the other one. And I just thought you could see them and just thought, I know exactly who's going to be stood up and, just seeing what was going on behind closed doors.
And Kevin's an amazing person as well.
But that part though, we talk, you touched upon this, but I think walking the floor, engaging people, EQ, IQ. But I think that's something that sometimes is overlooked because I can have 10 resumes in front of me and, we're all equally good.
Yeah.
When you sit down with people and you understand their chemistry and how they engage, that's the true tell of what that person's character is like, right?
Oh, absolutely. EQ is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And certainly when I look to interview people, or if I'm looking to add people to either my team or if I'm meeting them for other people's teams, I look for EQ. I really believe that in order for teams to succeed, everybody needs to have that emotional quotient, right? To be able to understand everyone, to be able to see things through that lens.
Yeah. I'm just curious because having worked here for such a long time, it's a very nuanced place in Singapore, but I know that a lot of the teams that you worked in have been very culturally diverse.
Yeah.
How have you adapted and what have the nuances been when you've been leading and building these teams? Because for people that haven't lived and worked in Singapore, it is so diverse. You do have to adapt, right?
And that's one of the things I absolutely love about Singapore.
Yeah.
Every bank that I've worked in has had a different cultural diversity and cultural fit. And especially in my role today, not only do I interact with a lot of people within our Singapore office, but we have 14 different markets. Yeah. And it's incredibly different when you're speaking to the Hong Kong team versus the team in Dubai versus the team in Malaysia versus the team in Kenya. It's amazing at how you need to really understand everyone's cultural values, what their, what drives them. And then we're all the same in the end.
Yeah.
As long as you can appreciate and understand that and bring that to your office every day, then you become one big team.
Well, tell us a little bit about oversight of what you're managing now.
So I'm at Standard Chartered now, and I look after advisory solutions for our group wealth management business.
What does advisory solutions mean? Because it means different things in different banks.
Course, yeah. So for us, let me first just tell you a little bit about our wealth management business, because that then leads nicely into where we fit. We're having an incredible period of time in our wealth management business at the moment, and our Q3 results have just come out, and we're really proud of how the wealth management business is performing. And that's a culmination of many things. The markets have naturally been good, but we've spent a lot of time over the last few years to really focus in on what's important to drive our business and bring new customers to our bank and then grow the customers that we have. Our board has now just agreed to double the investment in our wealth management business, which is so exciting. So I feel very privileged at the moment to be in this position where we have this ability to grow the business significantly.
Yeah.
We are looking to grow the business through growing the number of frontline people, so RMs, the wealth specialists that we have, growing them, because that's how we see we're going to grow our client base as well. We're going to grow our platforms and digital. There's a whole number of things. But when it comes to the front line, that comes with other challenges. You bring new people into the bank. Are they going to be more junior? Are they going to be looking for senior hires? Particularly when you're hiring at scale, you are challenged by making sure that you bring the right people in, and also that they can then adopt very quickly our operating model.
Yeah.
And so this is where advisory comes in. Wealth management advisory is a huge part of us enabling us to grow our business, because it's one thing to acquire new clients, it's one thing to bring in money, but we need to then ensure that we have a very strong advisory platform to grow those clients and to make sure that they feel that we are their wealth manager of choice. At any one point in time, most clients will have 2, 3, maybe even 4 banking relationships.
Yeah.
And if you are their premier banking relationship, you're going to have the lion's share of their wallet.
Yeah.
Second, third, fourth, you're in the low single digits.
Do you feel, sorry to interrupt you, do you feel, because when I look at clients in Asia, I think there are probably 3 types of banks that they immediately will gravitate towards. Number 1 will be traditionally a big Swiss bank, right? 2, I think a universal bank, like you guys fall under that bracket, and then increasingly a local bank, and then you'll have a boutique bank. So do you find that when you're competing, are you competing with all the banks or primarily the universal banks?
It's a great question. And we recently held a leadership summit that I was lucky enough to really listen to our senior leaders presenting at. And I love their message. Their message is, we have a right to win, but let's win where in areas that we are good at. And so in a localized context, there are only certain areas where we may have strengths over a local bank. So let's play to those strengths.
Yes.
We have a global footprint. That already gives us an ability to have a stronger proposition for certain clients. What's fascinating at the moment is when we look at our international banking, and it is growing incredibly strongly, particularly we've got a big focus on our global affluent Chinese clients and our global affluent Indian clients, many of which are more mobile now. They're banking in lots of different markets. So international is really important for us. And if you're a local bank, it can be very challenging to really provide a good proposition for those kind of clients. So being a global player really helps, because a client has a business in China, they can bank in China with our really great China team, but then they can bank in Hong Kong, or they can bank in Singapore with us, or they can bank in Dubai or Kenya if they want to, or Nairobi, in Ghana. We offer this platform that gives them choices.
Yes.
On top of that, because we're a global player, we get access to global products, global solutions, global managers and investment banks who will give us solutions or give us access to things that we may not have if we're a local player. So it gives us clout.
So advisory solutions, what does that mean in terms of asset class?
So we cover all. So I know recently you had Steve on the podcast, and you also had Nick. So we sit between the two of those.
Okay.
Nick represents the capital markets products. We also have our managed investments team and our alternatives team who are looking after all the managed solutions. Then we have our chief investment office. We are the team that sits between them. We are there to make sure that when a call is made, when an asset allocation decision is made, that the implementation of that then is done through an advisory lens. So we have teams in 14 markets. investment advisors.
Have you been to all 14 locations?
I haven't.
You've got to get the balance of, I want to go to Kenya. It's very important for business.
No, and I would love to. I plan to. I was recently in China, and that was really exciting, seeing what the team is up to there and really understanding. It's not until you're on the ground that you can understand what the business pulse really is. It's very exciting in China. They're growing their business rapidly. The value and the size of clients now is increasing very, very quickly.
Massively so. So I want to talk about work-life balance, right? Because I think this is something that we all struggle with. But as a mum, and I always feel that mums do a lot more work than dads, even though I'm a very involved dad, with 3 kids, how do you juggle? How do you balance it all?
So the term balance already sort of assumes that there's some form of equilibrium. and I think that it is very rare for that to be the case. A couple of things here. I think you're right in that often mums do take the lion's share of the parenting.
Well, kids naturally gravitate towards mums a lot more, right?
Yeah, although I'm very fortunate. My husband is very hands-on and does a lot of work with the kids. So he looks after the homework, which is great because that's, an area that I get too frustrated. So the work-life balance, during my early days when I had no children, when I wasn't married, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
I was 7 a.m. on the floor, reading the news, getting up to speed. Our first meeting was at 7:15, and then it's bang, you're on the phones. Markets open an hour later. You were there until late. You're often entertaining clients until very late at night. Now in my world, I feel really privileged. Standard Chartered has an incredible philosophy around work-life balance, around ensuring that everybody's mental well-being is taken into account.
Fantastic.
So we can work from home a couple of days a week. And so I tend to use that where I spend 3 days in the office or 4 days and then at least 1 or 2 at home. But what's interesting there is that there is this assumption sometimes in certain leaders' heads, and not in Standard Chartered, but you're hearing it already about this whole back to work rhetoric, that if you're at home, then you're not necessarily able to be seen and may not work so hard. I'm the opposite. So for me, I work harder. I'll be the first one in my household up. I'll be on the laptop. I'll be working.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, my children see me. And that's what I love, that I'm on work calls, I'm working, but I'm present. And they're not interrupting me, but they are seeing me. And it's the very first thing my children ask me every morning at 6 o'clock when we're out. They say, "Are you working from home today, Mum?" And they're off at school. They don't, it's not really a big deal for them, but it's obviously imprinted in their brain that when I come home, Mum will be there.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of balance per se during the week, but they see me and I'm very much a part of their lives. On the weekend, it's drop everything for the kids.
Yeah.
And I am mum taxi. I am mum coach. My husband is the coach who coaches the boys' rugby team.
Okay.
And
fully involved.
That I love because that's me giving as much of me that I can give on a weekend.
It's such a journey being a parent, right? And I don't know, like my wife and I, we only really ever argue about the kids because we have slightly different parenting styles.
What's your parenting style?
I'm old school. I'm very loving. I'm very supportive. But I think you've got to toughen up, right? And I'm no nonsense when it comes to that kind of thing.
Right.
We're not tiger parents, but what I've learned is that with my son's journey in particular, I'm so proud of him, is that he naturally wasn't a sports person in his own mind. I don't know where it came from. And I've just seen him evolve. And when he was younger, it was a little bit of pushing and pulling and a little bit of needling here and there. Because I don't think kids inherently are lazy, right? But parents can be lazy. So you have to get up and you show them. Yeah. So there's this saying that I live by: how I do anything is how I do everything. So if I'm up, like this morning, I was up at 5:30, I worked out. My son finished his exams yesterday and I saw him get up and he saw me, and I know that will just register with him.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's it. But But the difference is, I think I said to my son, I said, probably in your lifetime, you will rarely, maybe never meet another man who wants you to be better than them in all things.
Yeah.
But I want you to. And he's already there in many ways.
But I love that. You're an amazing role model.
I try
the fact that he wakes up and already sees you having done a workout, and you're ready for work, and you're already able to engage with him as well. I mean, that's an amazing role model, and he will take that into his career and his future.
You'll get this because you're a sports person, but it was like we sparred, we did some boxing the other day, and he whooped me.
How did that feel?
Well, physically it felt terrible.
Okay.
Emotionally it felt brilliant.
Oh.
And I put it like this: before I even moved 1 foot, he'd hit me 5 times, and I don't know what. Yeah, and he said he didn't tee off on me, but put it like this: at the end of the round, I had to go home. I sat in my car for 45 minutes. Isaac had to bring me a cold glass of water. I drove home. I was just lying in bed for 4 hours, literally.
Physically exhausted.
Just because he'd hit me. And
it was also mentally...
Just the physical side. It wasn't the mental. I wasn't worried about.
Oh, okay.
But and then for 3 or 4 days, I felt like I had a whiplash.
Wow.
And I texted him because and the thing is, it was the end of his training session, so he was already tired. And then he went out with his mates, and I wrote to him. I said, "You absolutely whooped me," and I just said, "I'm so proud of you so much."
See, I love that, and you're so proud of him.
Yeah.
And there comes a point in time, right, where your parenting relationship changes.
Yeah, 100%. That's
You're no longer the strong or the senior one or the one that knows everything.
Yeah.
You suddenly become more on a par with one another, and you become friends, and you become, I love the fact that you said, "I'm so proud of you." That's not said enough.
Yeah, my dad's, I love my dad dearly. We had a very complex relationship. He was old school. He'd never said he loved me. And he was a builder, and he was competitive with me. And I never understood that. Why would you want to compete with me? Just teach me.
Yeah.
And I made, and I love my dad dearly, but I never wanted to have that relationship with my kids.
Yeah.
Right. But I can tell you, I can still whoop them both running a short distance. I can't do long distance.
It's only a matter of time.
They're going to get me.
It's only a matter of time.
No, I genuinely think, I'm saying this on camera, I'm 47 now. I don't think they'll be able to beat me in a race before I'm 55. There's no way. It's not going to happen.
All right, I'll be back in touch with you in a few years, and we'll get you out on the Evans Road track, and we'll set up 100 meters for you.
We'll go. Maybe 50 meters.
I had a arm wrestle with my son the other day.
How did it go?
So that was my defining moment.
Okay.
Much smaller than your fight with as in your boxing, but I'm relatively strong.
You're a strong woman, I can tell.
He whipped me. And I thought I'd at least hold my own for at least 30 seconds or so, but no, straight down.
It's brilliant,
He's only 14.
Yeah, it's only 14. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about what your routine is, because the one thing that always staggers me when I see you, you always look amazing on point. I try to hold myself, to your standard. It's not easy. You're always slim. You're always in shape. I mean, like, do you watch your diet? Are you like exercising? If you say you don't do anything, a lot of women are going to be annoyed with you, right? Are you training several days a week? Is it structured?
Firstly, thank you. That's a very nice thing for you to say. I think we should all take pride in ourselves, right? Because the person that you present in a business environment, in a client environment, and also amongst your friends is how they then see you. So I do take pride in myself, but do I work harder? Probably not as hard as I should. I've always loved sport. I've always loved staying fit. I love that feeling of pushing yourself to the limit, and then afterwards thinking that hurt, but that feels so great. And I don't train as much now as I ought to. I spend my weekends exercising. I've got a fabulous group that trains out at Evans Road, and we do track work on the weekends.
Oh, wow.
And I used to do a lot of boxing, but in a more of a boot camp setting.
Yeah.
Which I loved.
Great fun.
That's really great, really good for upper arm strength. And I think as we get older, we need to make sure that we remember the importance of staying strong.
Yeah.
As our families start to age, you do see that if your bones and your muscles and your body stays strong, you can live a lot longer than the ones who aren't looking after themselves.
Absolutely. I want to just touch upon your odyssey, like in terms of self-development, you know, professionally. Have you been someone that has read a lot of books, listened to podcasts? You know, how do you stay in front of the curve?
So it's a fairly multifaceted question. As far as developing myself, I listen to podcasts all the time, and it's more out of interest. I'm a very curious person.
Yes.
I don't wake up and say, right, I need to read a leadership book. I'm going to read Cheryl's Lean In book today because that's going to remind me about the importance of, you know, speaking up and leading. That's not how I.
Have you read that book?
I got halfway through it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Cheryl, but I got halfway through it, and I think it has a lot of interesting things, but it wasn't necessarily for me. I listen to podcasts. I never. If you'd asked me 5 years ago if I'd felt that the podcast platform would become so mainstream, I would have said no way.
Yeah.
But today, first thing, you asked about routines. First thing I do when I wake up in the morning, I listen to markets. I'll listen to a CNBC podcast or something that just straight into my head, what happened overnight.
Yeah, bang.
And that's just that just resets me every morning. And it's not even like in my current role that I'm very as close to markets as I used to be, but it's just something that I love and I'm really interested in. So then when I go for my walks or if I go out exercising, I'll always have something playing, not music per se, it's usually a podcast, because that's when I do my best thinking.
Yeah.
I voice to text was the best thing ever invented for me because I will be out there, I'll be thinking, I'll pause, I'll quickly record it.
Yeah.
And I'll come back and go, wow, Pia, you're inspiring me now. So that's really where I do most of my self-reflection and thinking about where we're going to do certain things for the businesses when I'm outside of the office.
It's interesting. And I've always found, I don't know about you, but I can remember where I was and what the idea was when I'm outside. Because when you're at your desk, you know, because you're at your desk so often, it's not different. But if you're outside walking, you kind of remember, oh, I was here, I was doing this, and it kind of, you know.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in stepping back and being able to separate yourself from the day-to-day. Yeah. And it's very hard. And that's probably one of my failings, is that I like to be hands-on. I am a bit detail-oriented. I like everything to be relatively perfect. And so I do spend a lot of time reviewing things and putting things, you know, tidying things up. But when I step away and I think big picture and I think, right, you know, again, we have an incredible leadership team in Standard Chartered. My current boss is wonderful and really has this ability to think big as well. And I really appreciate the time that we have when we're together. And so I take those away from me and I step away from the desk, and that's when I think, right, where are we going to shift? What's our 2 to 3 year, you know, thought process around how we're going to move this? And back to the point around advisory, it's so important for our business, for us to be seen as a strong wealth manager. And when we're dealing in the number of markets that we are, we're not necessarily number one in all of our markets. And so we have to think about how can we bring a proposition to clients that actually makes sense and adds value to them. So they look at us and go, I want to be partnered with Standard Chartered. So they require big thinking, right? They require you to...
Do many senior bankers or market heads cover, you know, time with you and they say, look, Pia, I want to sit down with you, let me take you out for lunch, you know? Because my guess is it happens, but probably not as much as, you know, if I was a banker, you know, I'd want to speak to you. You'd probably say, stop calling me Paul, because I'd want to be very engaged and get ideas and exchange ideas.
To be honest, more so in my previous roles, simply because when you are on a product desk, right, when you are, you know, leading the solutions that are presented to clients, you've got a very, very close relationship with the RMs, with the bankers, particularly because I was in the private bank and it's a very high touch, high relationship driven business.
Yeah.
In my new role, it's not so new anymore, 3 years, I'm so privileged to actually see not just the private bank, but I get to see the business across the whole affluent footprint. And it's huge. It's a really big part of our business.
Yeah.
And it's so nuanced and different. from different markets versus even the way we operate in our private bank versus our priority bank. There are different customer needs. There's different solutions that we put together. There's different levels of maturity with the way our RMs operate and our IAs, our investment advisors operate. So we need to sit back and really think a lot more strategically about how we're going to shape the business. And so I don't get the opportunity to sit down with RMs like I used to, but I love it when I do.
Yeah.
Just last night we were out having drinks with some of the team, and I walked past a bunch of RMs who, asked me to join them, and we had a brief chat, but I had to run off to netball training. But that's the kind of thing that I miss. I do love that personal contact where you get to really understand how things are hitting the ground, understand their challenges, understand their needs. And every client, when you're especially looking at the private bank, every client has different needs. Every client has relatively specific, unique needs to them. And so as a partner, particularly whether it be on the advisory or whether it be on product, you need to be in sync with that, to be thinking constantly about the client first rather than the product first. And that's a really big thing that we are implementing across Standard Chartered.
I like that.
Our advisory framework that we have rolled out and we are really, really proud of focuses very much on the client and ensuring that every step of our advisory process starts with the client and starts with how do we understand what your needs are today, your needs are tomorrow, and your needs are into the future through forever. So these are skills that we're teaching the RMs, that we're teaching the investment advisors, particularly in our priority network, because we have thousands and thousands of frontline RMs at any one given time are reaching out to clients. So we need to make sure that they are consistently applying what we see as a really high quality Standard Chartered advisory process.
I love it. Just to wrap up, a few things I wanted to get a sense from you.
Yeah.
In terms of the non-negotiable values for you, especially at work, what are those?
Non-negotiable. Bad attitude. I mean, it seems pretty simple, but if I love people who are willing to get their hands dirty.
Muck in,
right? And that's my upbringing. That's me sort of being told from a very early age that, you're not precious, just do it. So attitude is really important. I'm going to rephrase your question. Rather than the non-negotiables, I'll tell you what I look for.
Okay.
And that is a really good attitude, someone who's just willing to be part of the team, willing to, no matter how senior they are, willing to drop everything and do something that's going to benefit the business. Creativity. You don't need to be in marketing or in branding or in digital design to be a really creative person.
For sure.
Even the best RMs who bring in the new clients and can bring in new and creative solutions have to think differently and more creatively. So I look for that. I love energy, naturally. I like high energy people, but then I also appreciate that not everyone can carry the kinds of energy that I look for. And yeah, that's probably sums it up. Attitude, creativity, and doesn't matter how senior you are. I think that you need to have that ability to bring people along for the journey, inspire others, inspire your peers.
Yeah, that's brilliant. What advice would you give for some young people that are embarking upon their career, want to be progressive and that are healthily ambitious? What would you suggest that they do in their roles to be seen, to be observed, to be recognized?
Yeah. Step up. That seems a bit glib, right? You go, what does that mean? What is that? That's a fairly easy thing to say, but be willing to be visible. If someone asks you to present something, or if you do some work that you're proud of, make sure people know about it, right? Step out of the shadows, step up, be visible, always be willing to say yes. When we joined Bank of Singapore, the concept of working groups was something that was new to me at the time. And suddenly I was like, wow, you got pulled into every working group. And I love that about Standard Chartered as well. We have a lot of working groups, which gives you the ability to work with lots of different people across the bank, and whether it be diversity inclusion or whether it be the learning team that I'm now on. These are places that if you say no or you're not willing to step up and be a part of these groups, you won't get the opportunity to hear other people's views, learn from other people, and also be associated with people from other areas. So make sure that you lean in, step up. Don't be afraid to make bad choices.
Yeah.
Because at the time, there are no bad choices. I look back on my career and I've changed careers from investment banking, private banking now, being much more broader across private and priority. And so give something a go.
I love it. Going to do some rapid fire questions.
Yep.
Favorite childhood memory from the farm?
Definitely riding horses and being out there.
I love it.
Yeah.
If you could ride anywhere in the world other than back home in Australia, where would that be?
So I'm a mountain person. I love mountains. The Alps is the best place for me ever, okay. But this isn't actually the answer. But through that, I would love to be in Montana. And I know that you went to Montana on a family holiday, but I think Montana looks like the most beautiful, picturesque place to.
It's stunning. Well, I've actually, talking of that, I did do a half-day riding trip just in the Montana mountains with this one fella, and it was just amazing because I felt like I went through 3 different climate zones by the time we got to the top.
I'm having these images of Billy Crystal and City Slickers.
Oh yeah.
I'm seeing you in your cowboy hat and you with your big chaps going woohoo.
Well, Jack Palance was a young version of Jack Palance was the guy that took him out.
Okay.
But yeah, it was brilliant. One book you've read recently or podcast that you've listened to that inspired you?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, probably more so than I read physical books anymore. A book that stayed with me for a long time is a book called Touching the Void by Joe Simpson.
Okay.
It's a must read.
Touching the Void.
It's about a British man who goes climbing with a friend in the Andes, and they have a fall. They're at 7,000 meters. They have a fall, and his friend is holding the rope, and he's hanging off a cliff. And his friend has to make the decision: either we both die here, or I cut the rope. And I won't spoil it for you, but he's the one dangling at the end of the rope.
Jeez.
And it's an amazing story. I read it years ago, and it's just stuck with me because it really teaches you about adversity and about, how you can overcome what are really quite, pretty terrible odds. So but podcasts, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I've listened to one called All In, which, is an American podcast, but it's a lot of founders who have a lot of really interesting
I love the
insights.
name All In.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. What's your best way to distress after a long day in the office?
Kids.
Is it?
Without a doubt. Nothing like having a good laugh.
It brings you back to...
It grounds you. I tease my kids a lot. We have a lot of fun together.
Favorite sport to play and to watch?
Play netball. I was playing last night. Love it. Coach it. Love it. Watch athletics.
Favorite sportswoman of all time?
Serena Williams, without a doubt. 23 Grand Slams. That's a no-brainer.
Beast.
Yeah, she's incredible, right?
Yeah.
And very inspirational. And I would love my daughter to see her as a role model.
Yeah, she's really an all-time great. If you weren't in banking, if you weren't in this career, what do you think you'd be doing?
I could be many things, but I'd probably be in the mountains. I'd be a mountain guide.
You and I have a lot in common. No, because I get that fully.
There's nothing like being on top of a mountain. It is. It's just magical.
It is magical. If you could give yourself one piece of advice when you were younger, what would that be? At any time, in your youth.
Oh, that's a really tricky one. Don't sweat the small things.
Yeah.
Really, a lot of things worry me. They worry us all, right? And then you look back and you go, wow, Pia, that wasn't really worth worrying. So
yeah.
Believe in yourself. Probably a lot of times I haven't believed that I had the ability to take on a role. When you get calls and people say, how would you like to do this? Oh, I don't think I can do that. So believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Give it a try.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking about my mum earlier, and what I noticed as she got older, she got to that point where she didn't give a crap. Yeah. Because you've lived life, what do you got to be worried about?
Yeah.
And I try to take lessons from that because we all have our anxiety, and fast forward, if you're 60 or 70, you've been there, done that. So interesting lesson to learn. What skill do you wish you have, but you've never sat down to learn?
I wish I'd done debating at school. I really do.
I've not met your husband. I'm sure he would tell me you're a pretty good debater.
No, I admire anybody that can think so quickly that in a debate style scenario they can come up very quickly with a great argument and a great quip and a great closure. That is an enormously important skill, and I wish I had it.
Well, let me tell you, my wife, lawyer, professor, Fulbright scholar, the ex-debater, 21 years together, and I've not won an argument ever. I'm not even come close. Right?
I mean, and to be fair to yourself and Tara, debating and arguing are slightly different, right?
That's true.
Because I do feel in the office environment, having that skill, because a debater has the ability to also change the subject to suit their narrative, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because you've got an audience, you've got to make sure that you are
requires
getting your
finesse
point
as well.
Absolutely.
And I love that. If I was to ask you what's one thing about you that would surprise most people that they don't know about you?
I've revealed a relatively large number of those today. It would be my love of DIY. There you go. There's something really...
I'm
on the weekend, I had a paintbrush. I went to this great little hardware store in an HDB near where I live. They're a beautiful bunch of people who work there, and every time I walk in, they laugh. And I came in and bought some timber paint on the weekend, and I was out painting my deck.
Good for you. I love it. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything
Are we
you want to
ending
cover?
on that note, really?
No, what else? Well, do you have you got any projects that you're working on now, you know, at home or with work that you want to talk about? Any major projects that you're allowed to talk about?
No, look, I've already highlighted. It's a really exciting time for Standard Chartered right now. Being in the wealth management business is really where we are, you know, investing in, and we are wanting to succeed much more than we even are today, which is we're doing really well. So I'll come back in a year and let's see how the next 12 months go.
My pleasure.
It's a really exciting time for us.
Thank you so much. It's been a great chat.
I'm glad that we have survived. There's been no flood.
I know, look, the sun's out now.
I know,
We're good.
lovely.
We're good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Pia.
Paul.
Cheers.